have unfolded over the last 24 to 48 hours. Parliament has been in uproar, serious questions being raised out of the Home Minister and the Prime Minister. With me, the man who's been leading the charge in a sense from the opposition side, from the Congress side, Congress MP Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Dr. Tharoor, let me just ask you firstly, what do you make out of the response of the statements or the lack of it that we have seen from Sushma Swaraj and Rajnath Singh today in the case of Kulbhushan Jadhav?
Well, I think it's fairly clear that they are saying what they can say, which is obviously that we condemn this and so on, but that they don't have any concrete specific actions to point to. It's true that they seem to have been taken by surprise by the development, but arguably so have many on the other side. This seems to have been a rather unexpected and dramatic move by the Pakistani military, which, as you know, conducts its own foreign policy in Pakistan. And I think that certainly those of our government who were in regular contact with the Pakistanis on this issue were totally blindsided, and some of that surprise is inevitably manifest in the reactions of the two.
Now, there are two things that have happened, in the last 12 to 14 hours. One is there was information that was coming out from the political side of the Pakistani establishment that actually the Pakistani civil administration led by the Prime Minister itself was not aware of the steps which are being taken by the Pakistani military. Now the Pakistani defense minister has gone on record in response to this criticism of Pakistan that this was nothing else but a case of premeditated murder. He is almost ratcheting tensions even more, saying that premeditated murders happen in Indian states like Gujarat and others. Surely this kind of a sentiment coming from Pakistan, it's almost like he's daring India. What does India do?
I think it's such a pathetic argument. First of all, what happened in Gujarat is unforgivable and tragic, but it was a breakdown of the state law and order machinery. Whereas in Pakistan, we're seeing the use of the state law and order machinery. The majesty and power of the state intelligence apparatus is used to kidnap an individual, put him before a military court-martial, and announce a decision to hang him. That actually shows the state misbehaving, whereas what we're seeing in the tragic situations that have occurred in our country is a breakdown of the state machinery. There's no comparison between the two, and I think in any case the weakness of that argument undermines and points to, I think, the weakness of the position of the Pakistan.
But sir, doesn't it also show that while we say that the Pakistani elected administration was not aware of the steps being taken by the Pakistani military establishment, if the Pakistani defense minister is making such statements, then do I still believe that Nawaz Sharif and the Pakistani army chief are still speaking in two different languages?
Frankly, the civilian government knows that its own survival depends on appeasing the military, and therefore they will, of course, fall in line eventually. But as the External Affairs Minister has pointed out, 3 hours after the announcement of the decision to hang or to execute this innocent Indian, 3 hours after that, our High Commissioner in Islamabad gets a note verbal from the Pakistani Foreign Ministry saying that we are willing to discuss conditional consular access to this man. So clearly even they didn't know what they were asking for.
But so what does India do? I want to know what Pakistan does is Pakistan's business. But what does India do henceforth? I'm seeing that we're not seeing too many international community members coming out in support of India.
Well, we have to drum that up. I think
how do we do that?
One of the things I've been saying in Parliament today, the most important point, in fact, is that while traditionally India has had a hesitation about internationalizing any issue to do with Pakistan, this issue is an international one, because what has been announced by the Pakistanis is not merely an assault on India. It is an assault on the very bonds of international law that tie the whole world together, that make it possible for us to live a civilized international existence. We are living in a situation in which an individual citizen of one country can actually be abducted from a second country, taken to a third country, and sentenced to death without any process, without any charges being published, and without any defense lawyer being given, with no consular access. So Vienna Convention has been attacked. Geneva Convention has been challenged. If they're claiming he was waging war, then the war conventions would apply. Geneva Convention would apply. They're violating that. They're violating every canon of international law. Now, if most of the world accepts the principle that we are all protected by respecting the same international legal conventions. So we should go to those countries, the rest of the world, and particularly those countries which are sponsors and patrons of the Pakistani military, the countries that have poured billions of dollars into the coffers of the Pakistani military, and tell them this would put Pakistan in the category of a rogue state. It would be violating a set of practices and principles and laws which the entire world adheres to. So I want us to internationalize it in that way.
But let me come back to what's happening in Parliament, Dr. Tharoor. Now I must say, and I say this with great responsibility and humility, that when I was witnessing what was going on today in the Lok Sabha, it was clear that the political opposition also was enjoying the process of pinching, tightening the screws on the government. All very well. Political points being scored, no problem. But in an issue like this, don't you think, sir, that maybe it's time for the political class to forget their differences? Why are we... Is it not possible for us to think of a scenario where the entire parliament stands united, stands behind the Prime Minister of the Indian state?
I think so. I think
but that's not happening.
No, it is happening. I think by and large, if you really look at the sentiments expressed by the 8 or 9 speakers who spoke, they all converge on the fact that we are united in condemning the Pakistani decision or announcement, and that we're with the government in finding a solution. We urge the government to find a solution. Now, if this translates into something like a resolution of the House tomorrow, I would not be surprised. But right now the ball is in the court of the government to take the necessary actions, and they will certainly have the support they seek from us.
So you're saying if there is a resolution which is moved by the Treasury benches, the Congress party at least will certainly be supporting the resolution?
Normally what happens is the Speaker would move a resolution on behalf of the entire House after consultation with both sides.
Okay. So Dr. Tharoor, final question then to you, that if the Indian Parliament hopefully appears united, tell me what's that one thing, that one step you believe the Prime Minister himself must take? We saw when it came to attending the wedding celebration of Ashari's family, Prime Minister surprised everyone. Do you believe, given the kind of hostilities which exist, surgical strikes, now Kulbhushan Jadhav, is there still some out-of-box method, diplomatic tool which can be exercised by the Indian state?
Well, I think in addition to the international measures that I mentioned, there is certainly a very strong bilateral message that needs to go, that this, if carried out, because we're still hopeful that it will not be carried out and it's just a statement by the military, but if this is carried out, that it will attract the most severe consequences. And in my view, it is probably better that Mr. Nawaz Sharif gets a direct personal phone call from Prime Minister Modi rather than a public statement which will only stiffen the backs of the Pakistani military.
You think Modi will do that? You think Modi can do that?
I don't know, but I think
Should he do that?
We must find, I think he should do it, and we must find the most effective means of communicating to the Pakistanis that this is a deal breaker, that there is no question anymore of normal relations after this. We have tolerated a lot. We have managed to maintain relationship despite 3 attacks on our army bases, but hanging a citizen in these circumstances in this way, without any process, without any chance of access or an opportunity to defend himself, will not be swallowed by the Indian government and the Indian public at any price, and the consequences will be extremely severe, starting with the breakdown of diplomatic relations, withdrawal of ambassadors, all of that. But I think before we talk about in public what it will boil down to,
simple phone call.
I think, my view, a very strong message, ideally man to man, if not at the very least at some very reliable source from one country to the other, that there's no doubt about the content of that message.
All right, Dr. Tharoor, always pleasure speaking to you. Lots of steps being suggested there by Dr. Tharoor. Let's see whether the establishment actually ends up implementing any of those formulas being suggested by him.